Democracy in the United States is dying. Trump is known to admire dictators and is aggressively trying to turn the U.S. into a failed democracy, just like they did in their countries. This video series shares 40 examples of how the United States in the early 21st century is looking like Germany in the early 20th century in some concerning ways. Trump appears to be copying Hitler's playbook, and MAGA is concerningly similar to the early days of the Nazi Party. The first video in this series sets out some important context. The qualifiers it includes, shown here, apply to all of the videos in the series. And now, Part 5, a comparison of how each leader takes control of government. Number 24. Both leaders failed in their initial attempt to become a dictator by force. Hitler tried initially to take over the government by force and become a dictator. He was inspired by the coup that Benito Mussolini and the Italian Fascist Party had recently accomplished in Italy in 1922. Hitler's attempted coup became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. Hitler stirred up around 2,000 Nazi sympathizers and sent them to storm the German Defense Ministry building. The riot resulted in the deaths of 4 policemen and 16 pro-Nazi rioters. Hitler and his followers were charged with treason, but Hitler only served around 9 months of his sentence in a cushy set of rooms with his supporters constantly visiting him before he was pardoned. Trump tried to take over the government by force and become a dictator. Trump's attempted coup is known as the January 6th Capitol riot. Trump stirred up over 2,000 MAGA sympathizers and sent them to storm the U.S. Capitol building. The riot resulted in the deaths of 5 policemen and 4 MAGA rioters. Trump and his followers were charged with insurrection. The rioters were convicted, but Trump never faced trial or a conviction. Both leaders then used their failed coup to generate more support before trying to take power again, legally. During the time that Hitler was in power, he regularly held ceremonies that honored the Nazi fighters that died during his failed coup. He called them heroes and patriots. After Trump regained power, he pardoned all of the January 6th rioters, including those who were convicted of violent charges, and he repeatedly refers to them as heroes and patriots. Number 25. Both leaders failed to win a presidential election and claimed election fraud as the reason. Hitler in 1932 ran for president and lost by a sizable margin, around 6 million votes. He claimed voter fraud and took the matter to the courts. He lost those cases, but never gave up the idea that he had won. Trump lost his run for re-election as president in 2020. He also claimed voter fraud and took the matter to the courts. He also lost those cases, over 60 of them, but has never given up the idea that he won. In reality, Hitler received 37% of the vote. That's the best he ever did in terms of popularity with the German people. Barely 1/3 of Germany supported Hitler. He was mostly ridiculed, not taken seriously, and considered a buffoon. Trump has done better than Hitler in terms of broader popularity, but he's never won a majority of the vote. Trump was also mostly ridiculed, not taken seriously, and considered a buffoon. People underestimate how attractive Hitler's and Trump's dog whistles and authenticity were to a sizable base of supporters, plus the accusations of the left, the economy, and all the other factors that we're discussing here worked in both of their favors. Number 26. Both leaders ultimately took office legally, then aggressively dismantled the guardrails that could stop them from becoming a dictator. Experts on authoritarianism say that dictatorships don't require a violent coup to come into power. Dictatorships often rise out of democracies that backslide into dictatorships. This happens through the slow but continual loss of individual liberties under the direction of an aspiring authoritarian leader, an authoritarian that was first freely elected. Two major acts cemented Hitler's dictatorship. One was the Reichstag fire decree, and the other was the Enabling Act of 1933. After these two simple and mostly legal acts, the German people's civil rights were gone, and the legislature was irrelevant. In their place were fear and the legal requirement to perform the Hitler salute. The Weimar Constitution technically still existed, but Hitler was above it. Hitler was untouchable, a true dictator, and it's stunning how legal all of this was. Trump also didn't ultimately take autocratic control by force, but similar to Hitler, once Trump was in power, he actively dismantled the government. He appointed alarmingly incompetent but loyal followers for all of his major cabinet positions. He fired the watchdogs from the different agencies that were there to monitor waste, fraud, and abuse, and then inserted his own unlawfully created agency, Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, which, ironically, but not surprisingly, was wasteful, fraudulent, and abusive. And this was all mostly legal. But unlike with Hitler, so far with Trump, the courts have held up against the worst of his lawlessness. Hundreds of suits have been brought against his legal acts. And at last count, he had lost 96% of them. But he also ignores a lot of those judgments. The U.S. Constitution is strained by his lawlessness. It remains to be seen if Trump will succeed with his dictatorial takeover of America. Number 27. Both leaders, once in power, moved quickly and aggressively to implement their dictatorial agenda. Hitler was appointed chancellor in January 1933. The Reichstag fire decree that stripped the rights of the citizens was issued in February. The Enabling Act that sidelined the legislature was passed in March. In April, boycotts were implemented against Jewish businesses, and Jews were fired from government positions. Trump, in his first 6 months in office, has signed hundreds of unlawful or potentially unlawful executive orders and memorandums. He's tried to revoke U.S. citizenship, invoked the Alien Enemies Act to strip people of their civil rights, sued to silence news agencies, and fired longtime employees of the Justice Department, FBI, and many other government agencies. Both leaders did these and many more unlawful acts as quickly as they possibly could in a deliberate attempt to overwhelm the system and break it before they could be stopped by that very same system. It worked for Hitler. We'll see if it works for Trump. Number 28. Both leaders used threats to subjugate the legislature. The Enabling Act that gave Hitler essentially unlimited powers was a constitutional amendment, so it required a 2/3 majority vote of the legislature to pass. Hitler secured the numbers he needed through a combination of legal and illegal actions. He had politicians from opposition parties thrown in jail on made-up charges, and his SA paramilitary intimidated most of the others into supporting the bill. Similarly, U.S. congresspersons have gone on record stating that they're afraid of voting against Trump-supported legislative bills. They're afraid of what MAGA paramilitary supporters might do to them or their families. They're also afraid of being primaried, that is, voted out of office by Trump heavily funding other candidates in the next primary election. The Enabling Act vote wasn't fully legal without key people present, namely those that were jailed. But Hitler had a friend, Hermann Göring, as the leader of the lower house, the Reichstag, that bent the rules of order to make the vote happen. The U.S. equivalent to Göring would be Mike Johnson, Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, and a Trump sycophant. He also has bent the rules in order to enforce Trump's agenda. As a side note, the only ones who wouldn't be intimidated by Hitler's threats were the left-leaning Social Democrats. Every one of them voted against the bill, in spite of being heavily intimidated. Likewise, in the U.S., the only ones that refuse to submit to Trump's intimidations are the left-leaning Democrats. Every one of them have voted against the bills of the Trump MAGA legislature. This video discussed similarities between the Nazis and MAGA in how each leader took control, or is trying to take control, of government. In the next video, we'll look at how each leader suppresses civil rights. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to sharpen the way you might think.